There is a point, early in certain fashion shows, when the audience stops treating the runway like routine. Naomi Campbell steps out, and attention sharpens. People who have spent hours watching suddenly look up again. Editors shift in their seats. Cameras come up. The response has repeated itself across decades, from her first years in European fashion capitals to much later appearances that still drew outsized reaction. She has walked into that kind of silence and attention for almost 40 years. The walk keeps doing it because it lands with unusual force in real time. The real question is why that force still feels singular after years of imitation, analysis, and tribute. The answer begins with craft, and it holds up under close inspection. Naomi Campbell was born in London in 1970. Her mother, Valerie Morris, worked as a professional dancer, and that background sits at the center of Campbell's runway style. Morris did not raise her inside magazine culture or luxury branding. She raised her around rehearsal, timing, repetition, and stage discipline. Campbell has recalled watching her mother work. Morris later described her daughter moving around as a child, testing gestures, posture, and rhythm long before fashion discovered her. When Morris saw that instinct, she did not push her toward a copy of somebody else's walk. She sent her toward training, ballet, tap, jazz. The point was control. Campbell did not arrive in fashion with raw instinct alone. She came in with training already built into her body. Attitude can be picked up by watching adults. Control takes years. It has to be learned in the body. It has to be repeated until movement stops looking practiced and starts looking natural. By the time she entered the industry, she already understood performance from the inside. She knew how movement reads from a distance. She knew how rhythm governs perception. She knew that posture is not decoration. It is structure. Valerie Morris described it in practical terms. She said Campbell watched her, watched Iman, and moved around the house with a growing sense of style. Morris then pushed her back toward dance vocabulary until that movement became her own. Campbell later said her mother taught her how to hear the rhythm, how to keep that rhythm even when there was no music, and how to stay aware of the clothes she was wearing while she moved. Those details place the walk inside practice rather than myth. The walk did not arrive fully formed. It was built. When the Victoria and Albert Museum mounted its exhibition on Campbell, that sequence was built into the presentation. The museum framed her first as a performer, then as a model. That ordering says a great deal. It places her runway presence inside a longer education in movement. The walk comes out of training before it becomes image. That is the base layer under everything that followed. Campbell was discovered at 15. Fashion noticed her young, but it did not find a blank slate. It found someone with years of physical training already inside her body. It helps explain why her rise looked so fast from the outside. The rise was fast. The preparation had started years earlier. People tend to think they understand runway walking because they can describe it in broad terms. Straight line, serious face, heels, turn at the end. That leaves out what the job actually demands. A runway walk is highly regulated movement. The posture has to hold from shoulder line to chin. The eyes have to stay level. The steps need placement, pace, and consistency. The turn has to land cleanly. The return pass has to carry the same charge as the first approach. A weak return can flatten the whole impression. Then there are the smaller adjustments. How much the hips move, how loose the arms stay, how the neck sits over the torso, how the stride length changes what the audience sees. The clothes do not sit still. They react to every one of those choices. Research on gait and attractiveness helps clarify why trained runway movement can feel so compelling. Studies on full-body gait perception show that people respond to coordinated motion across the trunk, head, arms, and lower body rather than to one isolated feature. Separate work comparing fashion models with non-models found that professionals use a wider range of strategies in knee extension, arm use, and upper body control. Campbell's walk does not depend on scientific explanation, though the research does help clarify why great runway movement registers as more than style. People are seeing a coordinated system at work even when they cannot name the mechanics. Campbell's own technical advice is direct. She favors long strides instead of short, hard steps. She keeps the back straight and the shoulders open. She keeps the arms controlled so they do not pull attention away from the clothes. She has said runway walking is a performance and that a model should move with conviction in every step. She has also spoken about lightness, the sense that the body is gliding even in difficult shoes. It sounds simple. In practice, it takes serious control. Lightness at that level comes from control, from balance, and from precise distribution of force. It is labor made invisible. One of the clearest things Campbell understands is that a runway walk cannot look busy. That is where many imitators lose the line. They add too much force in the shoulders, too much emphasis in the hips, too much awareness of the audience. Campbell's movement stays clean. The body does enough to animate the clothes and no more than that. The restraint is part of the force. Very few models hold that balance at the same level. Plenty of models can create attitude. Plenty can create elegance. Campbell holds both at once. The walk reads as composed rather than ornamental. The body is doing difficult work without calling attention to the difficulty. Part of the walk came from training. The rest took shape inside the industry she entered. She was discovered in the mid-1980s and rose quickly through European fashion. Within a few years, she crossed milestones that exposed how exclusionary the system had been. In 1988, she became the first Black model to appear on the cover of Vogue Paris. Fashion institutions and industry organizations later marked that cover as a historic break. Campbell has also spoken openly about how Yves Saint Laurent backed her at a moment when French Vogue had resisted that cover. The record around that episode has been repeated for decades because it reveals the structure around her rise. Talent alone did not remove those barriers. Pressure had to be applied. The same pattern appears elsewhere in her early career. The CFDA credits her as the first British Black model to appear on the cover of British Vogue. She later became the first Black model on the cover of Time. Those milestones tell a familiar story about firsts, but firsts are not the most interesting part here. The real point is the environment in which that walk was taking shape. Campbell was developing a professional signature while moving through an industry that still rationed recognition. She did not keep quiet about that reality. Alongside Bethan Hardison and Iman, she helped form the Black Girls Coalition in response to the shrinking visibility of Black models. Years later, she was still speaking publicly about equal pay, equal treatment, and racial exclusion in fashion. In a 2024 interview, she said she never wanted to be remembered only as the first to do something. She wanted the door to stay open behind her. You can see that pressure in the walk itself. Watch the early footage and one quality arrives before anything else. Certainty. She does not walk as though she is asking permission to occupy the space. She moves as if the question has already been settled. That quality cannot be separated from the professional conditions around her. She was working in rooms where the terms of visibility were uneven. The walk answered with command. Campbell did not invent authority on the runway. Other great models had it before her, and some of them shaped her early sense of movement. What set her apart was the way she brought authority, rhythm, line, and garment intelligence into one complete style of movement. It looked effortless on the surface. Underneath it was discipline held under pressure. Campbell's story is often told as a fashion story. That leaves out a wider performance culture moving around her at the same time. In Vogue's oral history of ballroom culture, a member of the House of Extravaganza described mimicking Campbell's walk while also saying Campbell learned from him, from the house, and from Willie Ninja. That exchange is important because it places her movement inside a larger Black and queer performance tradition instead of isolating it inside fashion legend. Ballroom had already developed a rich vocabulary of stance, rhythm, attitude, and presentation by the time high fashion began to absorb more of its influence. It treated movement as argument. It treated presence as something disciplined and judged. That culture understood how a body could deliver status, clarity, and challenge through gesture alone. Willie Ninja became one of the clearest bridges between ballroom and fashion because he carried those values into spaces that had long borrowed from queer performance without properly crediting it. Campbell's walk did not come from one source. It came from a convergence. Her mother's dance training gave her formal control. Fashion gave her the runway as sight and profession. Ballroom and adjacent performance culture helped shape a broader language of presence around that profession. In that wider setting, the walk reads differently. It carries technical polish, but it also carries a sharpened sense that movement itself can deliver a full statement. That does not mean the walk can be reduced to ballroom any more than it can be reduced to ballet. The point is synthesis. Campbell absorbed from multiple movement traditions, then refined that material inside one of the most visible professions in the world. The result felt individual because it was. The materials feeding it, though, were part of a wider cultural conversation already in motion. This wider frame also helps explain why other performers kept treating Campbell as reference material. Models studied her. Ballroom participants engaged with her. Drag performers responded to her. Pop culture absorbed her. When a technique has that kind of circulation, it usually means it carries more than surface glamour. It carries transferable knowledge. Campbell has returned to one principle again and again over the years. A model should let the clothes guide the walk. That idea sounds simple until you consider how many runway performances are driven by the opposite instinct. A young model often develops one reliable walk and tries to apply it everywhere. Campbell's method works in reverse. She has said that she finds a character in relation to the designer and the outfit, rather than presenting the same version of herself every time. The garment sets terms, her movement answers. That principle helps explain why the walk never hardens into a gimmick, even across decades of footage. The core signature remains, but it adjusts. The body becomes more fluid with some designers, sharper with others, more stately in one silhouette, more dangerous in another. The identity holds. What changes is the way she uses it. Designers and editors noticed this clearly. Zach Posen recalled that Campbell understood how to move in a bias-cut dress without distorting the torso. That sounds technical, and it is. A bias cut reacts to motion in very specific ways. A model who understands that can shape the audience's experience of the dress. Get it wrong, and the line can break in seconds. Jean-Paul Gaultier, as noted in Vogue's coverage of the V&A exhibition, designed collections with Campbell's movement in mind. That level of influence is rare. Her walk fed back into design itself. Other industry voices describe the same phenomenon from different angles. Andre Leon Talley spoke about her dancer's energy. Anna Sui said no model made clothes come alive the way Campbell did. Valentino treated her movement as singular. Edward Enninful emphasized work ethic and readiness rather than spectacle. Across those accounts, the same professional fact keeps surfacing. Campbell does not simply transport a garment from one end of the runway to the other. She changes how the garment is perceived in motion. That difference keeps coming up. If the walk were only about fame, designers would praise charisma and leave it there. Instead, they talk about fit, movement, animation, presence, discipline. They talk like professionals describing another professional's contribution to their own work. That language strips away a lot of the mythology and leaves the craft in view. That is also why the walk can look different from show to show without losing its identity. Identity here is not a set of fixed gestures. It is a governing intelligence. The same mind is making new decisions under new conditions. That gives the performance freshness, and it keeps the signature from collapsing into self-imitation. The V&A framed her in much the same way. The museum did not place Campbell above fashion history as a face floating through it. It treated her as someone who shaped fashion meaning through performance. That is a strong claim, and in her case, it holds. Much of Campbell's walk can be discussed in visible terms: posture, stride, timing, garment response. There is another layer, though, that sits inside the performance rather than on its surface. Campbell has said that when she walks a runway, she does not see the audience. She hears the music. She hears rhythm and bass. She sees the light. She has said every step has to be taken with conviction. She has also said that a model should never let the clothes wear her. Those remarks describe more than attitude. They describe concentration. That is one reason the walk resists simple explanation. People can describe what they see in front of them. They can describe the line of the feet, the balance of the shoulders, the expressionless face, the hair that seems to move in time with everything else. What they cannot directly see is the mental state organizing those choices. Campbell's own language suggests a narrowed field of attention, almost a performance tunnel, in which outside noise drops away and only rhythm, light, and garment remain. That interior state helps explain the walk's unusual steadiness. It also helps explain why imitation often looks hollow. Surface imitation focuses on visible markers: the stare, the chin angle, the sway. The visible markers are not meaningless, but they are effects. Without the interior control that produces them, they become decoration. Observers have tried for years to name what that control feels like from the outside. A longtime fashion figure told Interview in 2010 that he had never seen anyone else combine so much dynamic energy with so much majesty on a runway. The V&A called her catwalk presence superlative. British Vogue still described the walk in 2023 as powerful and fluid. All of those descriptions are reaching for the same thing. The effect is real. The mechanism includes something inward. There is also composure. The famous Vivienne Westwood fall in 1993 is important for that reason. The heels were extreme. Campbell went down in front of a full room and photographers. Then she laughed, rose, and finished the walk. The incident survives because the recovery was as memorable as the fall. It revealed how deep her performance control ran. The runway event did not collapse because one step failed. She reassembled the moment on the spot. That recovery stayed attached to the walk for a reason. A great runway performance does not depend on ideal conditions alone. It depends on what the performer can hold together when conditions break. Some runway moments become iconic because they capture an era at full strength. Campbell has several of those. The Versace finale in 1991, with Campbell walking alongside Linda Evangelista, Cindy Crawford, and Christy Turlington to George Michael's Freedom 90, remains one of the defining images of the supermodel period. The moment carries several layers of importance, and one of them is movement. It fixed a certain scale of runway charisma in public memory. Campbell was central to that image then, and she stayed central to runway memory long after the era itself was packaged into nostalgia. What stands out is how little the walk stayed in the past. In 2023, when Campbell appeared at Dolce & Gabbana in Milan, Vogue and British Vogue described her turn as the season's biggest burst of social media attention. British Vogue also emphasized how upright, composed, and fluid she remained in towering heels. It keeps the walk in the present. She was still setting terms in live time. The walk has also traveled well outside straight runway history. Beyoncé referenced it in Lyric. Drag performers responded strongly when they encountered Campbell as a coach. Entertainment Weekly covered Shea Couleé's emotional reaction to receiving runway guidance from her on RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars. Across those different arenas, the walk functions as shorthand for a very specific standard of command. That does not mean everybody citing Campbell is trying to become her. What keeps showing up is that serious performers treat her movement as something to learn from. They study it because it has structure. They return to it because it holds up under repeated attention. One person's signature becomes a benchmark only when others can keep learning from it without exhausting it. Campbell's walk has stayed in circulation for decades without losing its force. Runway footage, industry commentary, and later cultural references keep returning to it as one of the most studied and immediately recognizable walks in fashion. That reputation did not come from hype. It came from work solid enough to keep proving itself. One more element separates Campbell from many models whose walks are visually striking for a season and then fade into period style. Her movement survives changes in fashion itself. Minimalism, excess, 90s sharpness, 2000s spectacle, contemporary nostalgia, mature return appearances in couture or lingerie-inspired shows. She can pass through all of them without looking trapped by any one fashion language. The signature remains identifiable, yet it never feels frozen. That flexibility comes from grounding the walk in fundamentals instead of trends. Trends age quickly. Technical command travels. You can see this in the way later footage echoes earlier footage without simply repeating it. The line is still there. The composure is still there. The sense of destination is still there. What changes is calibration. A teenage Campbell, a 90s supermodel Campbell, and a woman in her 50s walking Milan are not delivering the same emotional texture. The walk matures with the person. That evolution is one more reason copies fail. Most copies imitate a snapshot. Campbell's actual walk is a moving practice, shaped over time, adjusted by experience, and responsive to the body she has in each era rather than the body people remember most loudly. Campbell's walk is unusually well documented. Her mother described the training. Campbell described the mechanics. Designers described how she handled clothes. Critics described the visual result. The museum world elevated the walk into an object of study. Few signature performances in fashion have this much record around them. And still, the copies break down. They break down because imitators usually seize the visible shell. They take the long stride, the narrow foot placement, the expression, the controlled hip action, the apparent ease. Those pieces can be mimed. The larger integration cannot. Campbell's walk depends on physique, timing, posture, garment intelligence, confidence, rhythm, and an interior steadiness that does not show itself as strain. Remove one element and the whole thing thins out. There is also a structural problem tied to the industry itself. Campbell has said younger models often walk too slowly and that her generation had more room to show personality on the runway. Whether one agrees with every edge of that complaint, the broader point holds. The system that shaped her prized, distinctive personal walks across multiple houses and seasons. Models had room to cultivate a recognizable movement vocabulary over time. Today, the runway ecosystem often works faster, coaches later, and standardizes more. Individuality still exists, but the conditions that once fed singular runway signatures at that scale are thinner. That shift says less about today's models than it does about the system that shaped Campbell. Her walk was formed across years of work for many houses, with enough continuity for her physical language to deepen instead of resetting every season. The walk accumulated. It took in new garments, new demands, new silhouettes, and new rooms. By the time the public decided it was iconic, it had already been under construction for years. That is why copying it still falls apart, even with all the research on the table. Campbell's walk was built the other way around. It began with training, focus, and body knowledge. The visual signature arrived as the result. The walk was supposed to serve the clothes. Campbell never lost sight of that. Her fidelity to the clothes is part of what made the walk so dominant. Designers trusted her because she understood what garments needed in motion. Audiences watched her because the motion itself carried force. Over time, the performance grew larger than any single collection it served. That idea runs through her whole career. Naomi Campbell did not create a trick. She built a practice. Dance training gave it skeleton. Fashion gave it stakes. A harder, narrower industry gave it pressure. Broader performance culture gave it context. Years of work gave it finish. By the time the world started calling the walk impossible to copy, the reason was already there. The walk held too many layers at once. People can still borrow pieces of it. They can learn from her directly. They can sharpen their own sense of rhythm, line, posture, and presence by studying what she does. That is what a real technique allows. It develops other performers without turning them into replicas. The fact that the walk remains recognizable after so many years of citation says less about mystique than about depth. There is still more in it than most copies can reach. The V&A opened a major exhibition on Campbell with footage of her walking for a reason. The choice put movement first, before the photographs, before the legend. That sequence got closer to the truth of her career than any slogan ever could. What fashion remembers about Naomi Campbell goes beyond what she wore. It lives in what happened when she moved in it. The room still changes when she steps out. The reason sits inside the work itself. It is training, concentration, taste, pressure, rhythm, and experience carried so deeply that the labor stops showing. The audience sees the result. The work stays hidden. That kind of durability is rare in fashion because fashion rewards novelty and memory later. Campbell managed both. She could register as immediate in the room and enduring in the archive. That is why the walk lasts. And after decades, that standard still stands, still studied, still unmistakably hers.